So I seen on the picture like your baby was something wrong with the eyes. Is that what they're saying?
A little lazy eye.
Okay.
But it's getting corrected, and he was corrected.
No, he was on no medication or nothing. Okay, so.
He's a healthy baby. So his little eye sometimes goes.
Yeah, my daughter was like that too. Yeah. So.
She was on medication for her eyes?
Yeah.
What was she?
Well, she had a genetic. It was a genetic disease. It was in December. That's when like it's cold, you know.
That's his birthday.
They tell us children are safe in their homes. They tell us schools, social workers, and agencies are there to protect them. They tell us that if something goes wrong, someone will step in. But time and time again, we see the same story repeat, and we realize those promises are hollow. Another child is born. Another family's account doesn't add up. Another community is left wondering how the signs were missed, and we are forced to ask the same painful question. How many warnings were ignored before it was too late for Emmanuel? This is not a new topic for those who follow this channel. We've been here before. We've looked at the children who disappeared, the ones who slipped through every crack, the ones who trusted adults who should have protected them. And now we are staring at yet another case that feels hauntingly familiar, but no less devastating. A little boy named Emmanuel, described by his parents as quiet, shy, withdrawn, fragile. They claimed he had a lazy eye, repeating that detail again and again. But did he really? Or was that just another part of a carefully crafted narrative designed to make people believe their story? It's a chilling thought. What if the one thing they kept emphasizing wasn't even true? What if the lazy eye was never there? The day Emmanuel was reported missing, panic swept through the neighborhood. People left their homes, some ran through the streets, others gathered in small groups, praying, searching, clinging to the hope he would appear. Neighbors brought toys, gifts, even candles, desperate to show support, desperate to believe this child would come home. But in the middle of all this panic, doubt grew like a shadow. People started noticing the parents' behavior, the way their tone sounded rehearsed, the way their words seemed strangely calculated. They weren't crying the way most grieving parents cry. They weren't stumbling over their words in shock. Instead, they spoke like people who had practiced what to say. And over, they circled back to that one detail, his supposed lazy eye. Why? Why latch on to that? Why was it so important for them to hammer that into everyone's memory? Neighbors began to whisper. Something didn't feel right. And then one neighbor decided whispering wasn't enough. They did something most of us would never think to do. They pulled out their phone, hit record, and captured a private conversation between the parents. A secret recording. Imagine that. While child services had the authority, the resources, the access to intervene, it was an ordinary resident who ended up collecting the most damning piece of evidence in the entire case. That recording, which you'll hear later, doesn't sound like parents grieving for their missing son. It sounds like people fumbling through a story, trying to hold their lies together, trying to stay consistent but failing. It reveals cracks that no amount of rehearsed statements can cover. And this is where the anger begins to rise. Because why did it come to this? Why was it a neighbor who had to act while professionals looked the other way? Where were the caseworkers, the follow-ups, the mandatory visits that were supposed to ensure Emmanuel was safe? Reports were filed, concerns were raised, people noticed signs. So why didn't anything be done? Was Emmanuel just another case number, another child in a stack of folders that no one had the time or energy to investigate? How many times have we heard the same excuse, we didn't have enough evidence, when in reality, they had more than enough to raise alarms. They just didn't care enough to act. Think about it. In a system that claims to protect children, the most important evidence in this case wasn't uncovered by investigators, but a neighbor who refused to ignore their instincts. If an ordinary person can see through the lies, if they can collect proof that others missed, then what are we even paying agencies for? Why do we continue to trust a system that has failed over and over again to do the one job it exists to do? Keep children alive. And what about that lazy eye? Did anyone outside the household ever confirm it? Was there medical documentation? Was it recorded by a teacher, a doctor? Anyone? Or was it a piece of fiction, crafted and repeated until it sounded believable? Because if the parents were lying about that, if they were willing to create a false image of Emmanuel just to convince others of their story, then what else were they lying about? Every detail becomes suspicious, every word suspect, and yet somehow these same parents were taken seriously by investigators, at least in the beginning. The more you hear, the more unbearable it becomes. The truth is that Emmanuel should have never been in danger. He should have been noticed earlier, protected earlier, saved earlier. Reports of neglect, whispers of abuse, concerns raised by neighbors, these were all opportunities to intervene. But each one was brushed aside, ignored, left to rot in a file cabinet. And now the community is left grieving, angry, betrayed, because the institutions they trusted did nothing, while a neighbor with a phone captured the one piece of evidence that might finally expose the truth. So ask yourself, why does this keep happening? Why are the people paid to protect children so often the ones who miss the signs? Why do they always come out afterward with the same hollow statement, "We did everything we could"? If they did everything they could, why is Emmanuel gone? Why does a neighbor have the recording instead of a caseworker? Why do we accept these failures as normal? And listen carefully to what the parents say in that recording. Ask yourself, do these sound like the words of parents in pain or the words of people trying to protect themselves? Do they sound broken or do they sound rehearsed? Should they have ever been trusted in the first place? And what about the agencies? Why didn't they catch this? Why didn't they act? Did Emmanuel ever stand a chance? These are the questions that matter, and they are the questions people are afraid to ask. But here, we are asking them, because Emmanuel can't. He doesn't have a voice anymore, but you do. Tell me in the comments, what do you think happened here? Do you believe the parents? Do you think the lazy eye was real, or was it part of a performance? Do you think child services failed Emmanuel, the way they failed so many other children before him? Your reaction matters, because silence is what allows this to keep happening. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this story is only beginning to unfold, and what comes next is going to be even more disturbing. The recording is just the start. More details will come to light, and they will force you to rethink everything you thought you knew about this case. So stay with me, stay angry, stay unsettled, because as long as children like Emmanuel are failed by the people meant to protect them, we can't afford to turn away. We can't afford to stop asking why.
I can't imagine, I try to put myself in that. I'm like, I know they're up. We were like, we know they're up. They're not sleeping. We were up too. And we're just like,
we're exhausted.
I know, I bet.
Partially delusional.
Where were you at when this happened?
I was at the park. I was at the park watching my son play football. Well, I had her
And then I take the baby. We're shopping.
Yeah, that's how I am too. I go to the store.
It was horrible.
It does.
The worst feeling ever.
It is.
Been balling on so.
No, you're just numb right now.
Yeah.
You're just numb,
The way the cops were treating us was horrible.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a
You
whole.
want to let us know nothing?
There are a lot of good cops. I'm not saying anything.
Yeah.
They're just doing their job, but
Yeah,
it's a horrible feeling,
No, yeah. So I seen on the picture like your baby was something wrong with the eyes. Is that what they're saying?
A little lazy eye.
Okay.
But it's getting corrected, and he was correcting.
No, he was on no medication or nothing. Okay, so.
He's a healthy baby, so his little eye sometimes goes.
Yeah, my daughter was like that too. Yeah. So.
She was on medication for her eyes?
Yeah.
What was she?
Well, she had a genetic. It was a genetic disease. It was in December. That's when it gets cold,
And yet,
Even with all the doubt circling, even with neighbors whispering about the strange behavior, officials seemed to accept the parent's story at face value. Investigators repeated the same lines to the media. "We are pursuing all leads. We have no reason to suspect foul play at this time." Words that sound professional, but in reality, they lull people into complacency. The truth is, those phrases are often code for hesitation. They give parents like these space to control the narrative while a child's fate hangs in the balance. And Emmanuel didn't have that time. He didn't have the luxury of waiting for agencies to catch up. Behind closed doors, neighbors were restless. They saw things others ignored. Strange movements late at night, conflicting statements, the constant repetition of Emmanuel's so-called lazy eye. One even admitted later that they weren't sure the boy had the condition at all. If that detail was exaggerated or invented, then it wasn't just a lie about his appearance, it was a manipulation designed to trap people's sympathy. How many of us heard it, repeated it, and didn't stop to question it? And how many professionals in child services glanced over that same claim and nodded instead of asking for medical proof? This is where the story cuts deep. It isn't just about whether Emmanuel's parents lied, it's about how easily those lies were accepted. How child services, the same agencies that exist to protect the most vulnerable, failed to interrogate the very details that could have saved him. Teachers had concerns, neighbors noticed things, there were reports, there were whispers, but nothing broke through the wall of indifference until a neighbor, an ordinary resident with no training, no badge, just intuition, pressed record. That's what it came down to. A simple act of suspicion that now holds more weight than every official file ever written on this child. And think about what that means. If a neighbor hadn't acted, what would we even know today? How much of Emmanuel's story would have been swallowed by the polished public statements of parents who knew exactly what to say? The recording isn't just evidence, it's a reminder of how fragile truth can be when no one is paying attention. But the question that haunts this case isn't just what happened to Emmanuel, it's why did no one stop it when they could? Because there were chances, there were openings. Every ignored report, every dismissed concern, every time someone said, "We don't have enough evidence," was another missed opportunity. And those choices, because yes, they are choices, piled up until the outcome became inevitable. Now we are left with a community that feels betrayed, a system that hides behind procedure, and a recording that could expose everything. And as you listen, I want you to keep asking yourself, do these sound like the words of parents desperate for their child, or do they sound like something else, something calculated, something that shouldn't have been ignored? And if you're watching this right now, if you feel the same anger building in your chest, then don't just let it pass. Speak up in the comments. Do you believe child services failed Emmanuel? Do you think the lazy eye story was real? Or was it a shield to make the parents look more believable? Your reaction matters, because silence is exactly what lets cases like this disappear. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Because the more people know, the harder it becomes for officials to ignore. This is only the beginning of Emmanuel's story, and the recording you'll hear next will raise even more questions than it answers. Stay here, stay unsettled. The truth is still unfolding.